If anybody wants to stop and ask questions, please feel free to. Because I mean, this needs to be more about if you have any specific questions, you have any specific needs, we want to make sure we address them, while we're together. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm Pamela Brizendine. I am with AIM Insurance. AIM Insurance has been an insurance carrier for about 20 years. We do specialize in PTA, PTO, and booster clubs. So therefore, because this is our specialty, we don't insure buildings, we don't insure businesses. We're able to keep our prices low and keep our coverages specified to exactly what your needs are. We do adjust them as the times have changed. Like this last year, a lot of areas have started asking for increased sexual molestation coverage. So we've went in and adjusted our policies, to fit what the needs are. So it's very different from any other type of insurance that you can get that's insuring homes and autos and a million other things. We specialize in just what your needs are going to be. Okay. All right. So the first question is, why does the PTA need insurance? First of all, the PTA needs it to protect their assets and the personal assets of the members. This can also include the personal assets of the officers. Anyone can sue for any reason, and they do. We get some crazy lawsuits over the little stuff, but people get emotional. PTAs are not immune for liability. Typically, the school insurance does not cover the PTA. And that's a big one that a lot of especially booster clubs, because they don't have less directions than PTA, but a lot of organizations don't understand. They think if they're having an event on a school property that the school insurance is going to cover. It is not. If a PTA is having an event on school property, it is still going to fall under the PTA's insurance, not the schools. Now, if there was to be a huge major claim, like someone seriously injured or killed, obviously the lawsuit's going to include the PTA and the school, but still it's going to be the PTA's primary responsibility if it's their event. So one of the main things is the insurance does pay the attorney to defend you. That's a huge thing, especially in a frivolous lawsuit. It'll pay your attorney fees and then up to the amount insured for the coverage. Okay, and the next one is, what kind of insurance should you consider? The most important one is general liability. This is typically what your schools are going to require. It's also going to be required if you have an event at the city or the YMCA or the church or any place you're going to have an event. They're typically going to require at least 1 million general liability. General liability is what pays out if anybody was to get injured or killed. Included in the general liability, we offer $5,000 worth of medical, and we give you an option to purchase the extended medical, but that's just an option. We give you $5,000. So what this means to you is you're having a carnival, little Timmy falls, breaks his arm. Now, the parents don't want to sue the PTA. They just want you to pay their medical bills. The medical is a really good thing for you to know. This is something that's not mentioned a lot because you can make a situation keep it from getting bad just by knowing this. By knowing, hey, you can say to these parents, look, I'm sorry this happened. We'll take care of your medical bills. But it goes away. Otherwise, if you wait for little Timmy's parents to go do their stuff, then they go hire an attorney. Then you're looking at, lawsuits and attorney fees and just the headache of having to deal with it. When in all honesty, most of the time, the parents just want you to take care of the bills. Now, if it's a huge, major accident, obviously that's different. But for your typical things that happen every day, one of your officers drops a box on her foot, grandma slips walking up the stairs and breaks her hip. Those are the kind of things you see every day. Those are the kind of things that can be taken care of out of the medical part. Okay. Media liability. This is kind of a new one that's became really popular this year. Previous years, it was not. Media liability is going to cover anything online. So that goes into your websites, your social media. But now this year, obviously, things change. So now we're doing Zoom meetings like we are now. Well, a lot of organizations are doing more online events. They're doing online fundraisers. They're doing, so we have some that are doing online PE classes, online tutoring. We've seen ones doing online yoga classes, anything to help keep the kids more involved and get things active while we've all been cooped up at home for this last year. Your media liability is what's going to cover that type of coverage. Terrorism is recently added to the policy just this year, starting in June, well, past year in June. Terrorism is defined by the certified act of terrorism by the federal government. So that is now included in all of your policies. Now, fortunately, we don't have a lot of those, but obviously the first one we think of is 9/11. That's what started this Terrorism Act. But since then, we have had some school shootings. We have had some church bombings. We've had some various other things that have been classified as terrorism. So you do have certified terrorism coverage on your policy, included at no additional charge for you right now. Okay. I see that Elaine has a question about the media coverage. It is per incident, per occurrence, and we have different options for the coverage amounts you can get. You can get up to, I believe, 100,000.
I guess, so my question is,
Mhm.
what kind of a lawsuit or whatever would, like, let's say you said you had a yoga class at home or something like, I mean, what kind of stuff is covered in a media, like what, I'm trying to think of, what kind of, things would happen that would make make someone sue you and, over some kind of a media issue, I guess is
Okay.
kind of what my question is.
Yeah, the coverages, the claims that we've seen in the past, and like I said, this is going to change over the next year because life has changed. But the things that we've seen in the past have been, you posted a kid's picture without permission. That's a huge one. Especially you're posting at a group event from your carnival or any type of fundraiser, and then one of the parents says, I didn't want my kid's picture posted. We've seen that many times.
Yeah.
You're posting incorrect information. So you have one of these Zoom meetings and you put in there that such and such is there, and somebody comes back and sues you for that. Logo infringement. We've seen logo infringement. You say, okay, we're going to have a fundraiser at McDonald's. You post the McDonald's logo, and then they come back and sue you because that was not the current logo they're using. We've seen defamation of character. This was a huge one we had last year, and this was actually a PTA officers. Two PTA officers got into a Twitter war, and some words were exchanged, and one sued the other for defamation of character. So those are the type of things we saw in the past.
Wow.
Now, like I said, this year with all these new Zoom things and stuff, we're expecting some different types of claims. We haven't had any come in, so it's hard to say exactly. But like you said, the yoga class. Obviously, if somebody was to get injured, that is going to be because someone at home doing the yoga themselves, they can still sue you if it was your event. Now, the difference is there is a catch on that one. That would actually fall under your general liability if that happened, but they still could fall into the media if somehow they brought that in. But if someone was to have we've seen a couple of virtual fun runs where somebody got injured, and the general liability pays that out.
Wow.
And even though you're thinking, yes, I know the kids at home and they still, the parents are going to say, oh, well, he was doing your event, so I need you to pay for it.
Unbelievable.
So, it is. I mean, I've actually seen a suit where a parent sued the organization because, well, this goes into directors and officers, but it's still going to apply because they bought library books they bought playground equipment instead of library books. We've seen where you use ABC Plumbing instead of their husband, the plumber. They thought you were, what do you call it, discriminating against them because you didn't use their service. Just crazy lawsuits. So you just want to make sure you're prepared. I don't know how much in the future people are going to be doing things online, as the world starts to open up. At this point, it still looks like we are. But it could all start opening up next year, and maybe we won't have as much need for that. But I just want to make sure everybody's informed of what it does cover.
Amazing.
All right. Okay, let's see. General liability. So what does general liability protect you from? Lawsuits resulting from bodily injury and property damage. Now, how the property damage figures into that is you're having an event at the school, you're bringing in some tables and you scratch the gym floor, or a window actually gets broke when you're carrying something out. We've seen someone pull a U-Haul up and rip the whole top of an awning out. So if you're having an event at any place, and this can be the school or like I said, the YMCA, you can have your events anywhere you want. But if you're having an event somewhere and you accidentally damage their property while you're there, that will pay out under your general liability. All right, so who needs protection under the general liability? The named insured, that covers all PTA members, volunteers, and employees. So this covers, if you're having an event, your general liability covers everyone. That's it. And we get asked this all the time. What if it's not a student? What if it's such and such coming to the event? Your general liability is going to cover anybody who comes to your events. Okay. Policy limits, PTAs should look for policy containing $1 million. We offer $1 million coverage as well as a $2 million. Very rare instances somebody actually needs the $2 million. Typically $1 million is satisfactory. All right, and let's go to the next one. These are type of activities that is covered under your general liability. Roller skating parties, dances, carnivals, graduations, swim parties are covered. We get a lot of calls on swim parties in the summer. We do ask that you get a participation waiver signed. It is not required. It is not going to void your insurance if you don't. We just think it's a good extra little layer of protection for you. Prom parties, fun runs, meetings, bazaars, dinners. On the dinners, I should also mention liquor. A lot of PTAs ask us about liquor liability. You do have host liquor liability included in your general liability. So if you want to have a casino night or you want to have a dinner where you're serving wine for a fundraiser, then those type of things are covered. But for bounce houses, we get a lot of calls on bounce houses. Babysitting, we do ask that you never have you always have at least 2 people with them at all times. Never have one person alone with the children, and one person needs to be at least 18. So if you want to have an adult, with a couple of high school kids, so I know a lot of PTAs use high school kids to babysit during their meetings and stuff. Food sales is one that we get a lot of asked questions on. So if you hire a food truck to come in and everybody was to get food poisoning, their insurance is liable. But if you have a barbecue and you cook the meals, your volunteers cook, your parents, anybody, and everybody was to get sick, your insurance will cover that. And we actually had one where we had over 200 people get food poisoning from barbecue chicken one time. So it was bad, but the good thing is we covered it. We took care of everybody's medical bills. Okay, so then the next one, what kind of activities are excluded? Automobiles are excluded. Now that we do offer a rider starting this year, and as I said, we try to adjust our policies as the needs occur. So we do offer a rider this year. It's called a hired and non-owned. You do have to purchase an additional, but it is only $5, so it's very, very reasonable to add. So this would be if you want to hire a charter bus to take the kids on to the event somewhere or something like that. It would also cover the officers, like if you, Christina, were to get into an accident while you were taking your car to a meeting or something work you were doing for the organization. The hired and non-owned covers things like that. We do exclude watercraft, so we don't cover any type of watercraft, workers' comp, fireworks, mechanical rides. Mechanical rides would be Ferris wheels, those type of things. Excuse me. Excuse me. Also, zip lines, bungee jumping, archery, weapons, gun range, that type of things. All those type of things are going to be excluded. The big one, not so much with PTAs, but booster clubs, we get a lot of calls on these organized sports. We do not cover the school teams. But if you want to have if you're going to have an event where you want to do the 8th grade boys versus the 8th grade girls softball team, and that's a special event for your fundraiser, we would cover that. We just don't cover the normal school activity teams. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see, next one, extended medical endorsement. I kind of went over this briefly, but this is what I said earlier about how the medical endorsement can make something bad go away. Most of the time, the parents don't want to sue. If it's a legitimate claim, a lot of times the parents don't want to sue. They just want you to take care of their medical bills. And that's why it's always really, really important that you understand and know, and all the officers know that that is there, because it can keep something from turning bad quickly. And we do offer the higher coverages. Like I said, we include the 5,000, but we offer options for up to 50,000. Kathy, she asked, is it best to offer the coverage at the onset of the incident? In my personal opinion, yes, it is. Because there's too many ambulance chasers, for lack of another word in my brain, that can make something turn bad. But if you can just, like I said, little Timmy's running down the hall, slips and falls, breaks his arm, you as an officer take charge right then and say, look, let's take Timmy to the hospital. Let's get him taken care of. We'll take care of, in our insurance will take care of the medical bills. And you're saying that up front, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take care of it. Then the parents never have to get upset. They go, okay, well, this is just what happens with kids. We get it done. We get it taken care of. And a lot of times they'll say, just take care of my deductibles, or whatever. But if you wait for them to go, and then they, take to the hospital and they're on their own and they're feeling frustrated, then they start getting all these bills for thousands of dollars. Well, what do? They call an attorney. Now, the attorney's going to, the insurance is still going to pay. So for us, we don't care. We're going to pay either way. But it becomes a bigger headache to you. And it brings in a lot of lawyers and a lot more fees if you have to do it at a later date. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I missed a question here. Can you talk about, Elaine asked, can you talk about paid versus unpaid?
Right. So I'm sorry. The reason I'm asking that is, I'm the PTA treasurer, and I'm actually incorporating some of this information, just kind of in general terms about insurance in my treasurer's workshop today. And the one thing that I remember, or maybe I even saw recently, was, people at local units struggle with childcare at meetings lots of times. And we tell them that they have to use unpaid babysitters, and that, handing somebody a gift card for $25 is, like considered payment. So, they're supposed to be volunteers over the age of 18. And that is something that local units in the past have struggled, but I understand the reason for it. Looking at the insurance policy, the reason for it is the risk that a child gets injured. That's why you want two people there, but also that there could be a cause of, oh, she hit me, or, this person hit me or touched me or something inappropriate. So I just want to have you kind of expound on that just a little bit, because that takes a lot of people off guard when we tell them that.
Yeah, the problem is ours policies don't specifically say you can't pay. I believe that's a PTA regulation. It's not actually an insurance one. I'm not going against the PTA. I'm just saying what our policies specifically say. Our policies don't specifically say that you can't pay. The problem comes in is if you are paying them, then they become an independent contractor. So if you are paying them, they are not covered under your policy. Now, all the kids are, and if anybody was to be injured or anything to happen there, your event, your meeting, your kids are still covered. It's just the person you are paying is not covered. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. And that's going to be the same with any other kind of thing. Like if you hire a vendor to come in and bring hamburgers, your event's still covered, your guests are still covered, but the vendor you are paying is not covered under the policy. Okay. All right. So you can pay, and like I said, unless PTA specifically tells you something different, I don't want to go against anything they said. But as far as the insurance policy, that there is nothing against it in our regulations.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure. All right. Let's see. Megan asked, does Colorado PTA have coverage that helps local units? Not all units may be able to afford this coverage. Yeah, that's something you're going to have to ask Colorado because
yeah.
I know Colorado has required coverage for their policies, but I don't know. I would assume all units are required to have it.
Well, so here's what we do, and this is kind of a different topic for field service, but we actually do pay local unit, new local units, especially we cover their insurance for them. There are other ways around. So I would suggest that this, who's asking this, from what unit? From Megan, that, you know, especially if you're a new unit and there are other circumstances, that we will step in and help you with that. So the best thing to do is to contact somebody on the field service team. Either, you know, you can actually just send something to the office at coloradopta.org, or if you're in a council, or, you know, if you have a region director, which I know that we're a little bit thin in that area right now, but just ask one of them. But we do help units with that.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next page. So the next page basically just talks about the extended medical endorsement, which we've already talked about. The standard limits are 10,000, 25, and 50. Like I said, we include the 5,000 for free. And then to add it up, we have those additional options. All right, the next one is the media liability. Went over this pretty good. What types of risks are you protected from? Posting photographs, using trademark logos, misrepresentation of information, making confidential information public. We have seen that happen before too. And that is where you accidentally post something. We've seen one where they accidentally posted somebody's address. And you know, that happens. Media endorsement covers Facebook, PTA website, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and like I said, others, which now includes these Zoom meetings and, you know, so basically you just think anything online. All right, the terrorism coverage, and I went over that with you. It is included in your policy now, so anything that's considered a certified act of terrorism. All right, so I'll go into Fidelity Bond. I'm going to check one thing real quick. Sorry. All right, so your policies that are required by the Colorado PTA include the general liability, the bond, and the professional liability. Okay, so you do include bond, and that's what I want to make sure. So to me personally, the bond is probably the most important coverage. And I say that because it is our #1 claim. So the Fidelity Bond insures your money from theft or embezzlement. The whole reason we have these organizations is to raise money for something. And, you know, and so you hate to raise all this money, go through all this work and do all this effort and then have it be stolen. This is the fraud triangle that's on the picture right now. Most officers don't get into the PTA thinking I'm going to steal money from them, although we've seen it happen. Most of the time it just happens. You know, your husband loses the job. You think I'm just going to pay my electric bill and then I'll pay the money back, and then it turns in. PTAs, PTOs, booster clubs, these type of organizations are not really highly, you have a lot of freedom. You don't have a lot of people watching your money. You don't have a lot of people seeing what you're doing. So it becomes very easy to go spend that money on something else. And then once they do it once, then they do it again, and they do it again. And the next thing you know, they went through $10,000. Well, then those officers tend to just kind of disappear, and then the new officers come in and they can't get the books, and it becomes this whole drama. And by the time somebody figures out, everything's gone, you know, and it's a bad. So what the Fidelity Bond insurance does is, #1, it insures the money, but also it gives you a checks and balances. I think it's going to be on the next page, but nope, I'm sorry, go back up. Start talking. Okay, I don't even know what it says in here, but I'll just say there are 2 requirements for the Fidelity Bond. And this is important since this is something all of you have to have. The 2 requirements for the Fidelity Bond is that a non-check signer checks off on the checking account each month. So you can have anybody do it. Typically what we see is the president and the treasurers have the check signing ability. Then you have either your vice president, secretary, be the one who signs off. That way it's a main officer, they're fully aware of everything going on, what the money's going to, but they don't have the check signing ability. It can be any other person. It doesn't have to be one of those officers. And then we also require that you have an annual audit. So the annual audit can be done by someone you pay, certified CPA or something like that. But it can also just be done by committee, especially, in small PTAs that can't afford a lot, don't spend a lot, they don't really need to pay that kind of money. The committee needs to be a committee of at least 3 people that do not have check signing abilities, and to do an annual audit of that. Now, isn't this something Colorado requires anyway? I believe it is.
It does. And, it's funny because we do require, the one thing I guess that, is good to know, and I will make sure that my workshop reflects that. It's 3 people, because sometimes, we have people that do it outside the local unit. Like, I actually participate in a lot of local unit audits. And I usually try to coordinate that with a couple members of the PTA, but there are times when the audit is done by fewer than that many people, but they're done by volunteers that are not in necessarily, that local unit. So, but it's good to know that you require 3 audit. And our financial review has a spot for 3 signatures, but I can't guarantee that we monitor it that closely.
Yeah. And if we just, and honestly, if you had an audit done and you had it done by 2 people, it was a small unit, we're not going to deny the claim over that. Honestly, we're not. Because at least you made the effort and went through the thing. This is just what we're trying to do. And you're right. A lot of PTAs use somebody that's not an officer. When I was president, I actually had a parent that worked at the bank. And she couldn't volunteer and couldn't do a lot of things, but that was one of the things she could do for me. And I felt real confident with her because she was a very smart woman, very business savvy, and was comfortable looking at those numbers. Okay, and so how much bonding coverage do you need? Your policies actually, Colorado requires that you have a $10,000 bond or a $50,000 bond. So the recommendation we make on that is typically what your annual budget is. And that's just approximate number. So if you're running, $5,000 a year, obviously get a $10,000. If you're running $25,000 a year, we do offer a 25. But I think according to Colorado, it looks like y'all would probably want them to go up to 50. We do offer higher limits. So if you have any units that have really large budgets, we do offer the higher limits if you should need. We go up to 500,000 actually, and we do have some units that need that big of a bond to be fully covered. All right, so the next one is the officer's liability. Officer's liability is another coverage that is required by the Colorado PTA. This is what protects the officers from being sued personally. Some following situations: inappropriate use of funds, wrongful acts, discrimination, not following the bylaws, or misrepresentation. And this one, I told you, I've seen a lot of really frivolous type suits in this one, where, like I said, you didn't hire their husband a plumber, where they thought you didn't get a vote on something you spent some money on, that you did something and they didn't think you should have got the whole vote, not just the officer vote, the whole unit vote. We see a lot of things like that. And if you didn't have this coverage, you would be responsible for hiring your own attorney and defending yourself until such time that you were proved guilty or not guilty. And most of the time you're not held liable, but you would still potentially be out thousands and thousands of dollars in attorney fees just to defend yourself in a frivolous suit. So it's really important and really good that they require that you get this, and this helps protect you because you're volunteering your time, you're doing this, for them, and you don't want to risk your personal assets. You do not want, a suit that could possibly result in, being against your home, your savings account, your 401k, because of something you might have done incorrectly. And particularly on something that, which we've seen it very rarely, thankfully, but like we had one suit that was, it was a death, and the person got electrocuted. Well, of course, they not only sued the school, they sued the PTA, but they sued every officer, and it did come down to, did the officer make this decision to have this person install this sign? And they did, and they were held liable. So, and Lord knows you wouldn't have thought, I mean, I'm sure the officer thought nothing about this when she did it, that she was potentially putting herself at risk by making this decision to not hire a certified electrician. They just had let a volunteer parent do it. Okay, so not to bring everybody down, but just wanted to let you know that's important. All right, inland marine property. It's property coverage. Now, most PTAs don't have a lot of property. So this is obviously not something that your Colorado PTA requires. But it is something good to know for a few certain reasons. Obviously, if you've got property, this gives you some examples, a popcorn machine, auction items, barbecue grills, those type of things. Most PTAs, if they own property, it's only $500 or $600 worth. It's not a lot. But where this coverage can be important to you is if you do big fundraisers. If you are doing a $10,000 chocolate fundraiser, and that chocolate melts, guess who's liable? If you're doing T-shirts, if you're doing wrapping paper, and like I said, if you're doing $500, $1,000 fundraiser, it's probably not worth buying. But if you are doing $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 fundraiser throughout that year, it may be worth purchasing for you, because nothing worse than having that property damaged and losing it. And we do see this happen all the time. Auction items, it mentions on this page, and that's also another big one. Some companies do auctions, and you can have a lot of property on you at that time. So that protects for that. And also rentals. So if you're having a big carnival and you're renting some very expensive lights and stuff, that may be a time you want to think about that. If you can get some coverage through them, it may not be cost effective, but we see this in California, particularly a lot. They'll rent these lights that are $50,000 lights, and they need to make sure they're insured, because if something happens, they're liable. So those are just the kind of things to think about throughout the year, that if they should come up, you may want to purchase this additional coverage. All right, and I believe that is our last page. And did anyone have any questions for me? Did we touch everything? I know we answered some, but.
Pamela, would you address the protection for board members against discrimination? What kind of situations would those be?
I'm sorry. What kind of discrimination? I need to understand the question a little better.
There was a listing. It said discrimination was one of the things that it would protect.
Okay, so is an example of what I have seen is one of the parents thinks, let's just say you have two parents, one is a white and one is a black, and you choose this white lady to be your chairman of this committee, and the black lady was to say, oh no, I was discriminated against because you chose her to do it instead of me. That's kind of what pops in my head right now, because all the racial stuff going on right now. But that would be, and she decided to sue you for the racial discrimination. And you obviously, didn't make that your decision based on that, but you still got to defend yourself against it.
Yeah, you have to defend yourself, but what kind of, would you be looking at then, if you would award, insurance claim to them if they sued?
If they could prove it, definitely we would pay it.
Yeah, is that through documentation?
That's a really hard one for me to answer. I am an insurance agent, but I'm not a claims adjuster. Claims adjusters have very strict rules on what they need, what they don't need. For a claim like that, yeah, they would probably have to have some type of proof to show that maybe that this was a habit, maybe that she never hired or never allowed any Black people to do it, or she just would have to prove that there was some type of discrimination for us to pay out.
We have
But
a
if it was proved,
situation-
we would.
Okay, we have a situation that has potential right now. That's why
Okay.
I'm asking.
That's why you're asking.
Do you have anything in writing that the claims people then could, send to us, define
No,
what they would be looking at?
we do not, because I mean, as far as the policy goes, the policies just have that language. Once a claim is filed with us, then the claims adjuster will go in and ask for details. And every single situation is going to be unique and different as to how it would play out. And a lot of times, that type of suit is actually filed with the attorneys and it's filed in court. And the judge is the one that's going to make a determination, not a claims adjuster. On the general liability, it's typically a claims adjuster. On a property damage, it's a claims adjuster. Those type of things typically are filed with a lawsuit and they go to court, and it's a judge that's going to make the final determination.
So they would file it in court
Mhm.
against our PTA board, I assume.
Mhm.
Where does the insurance come in then?
Your insurance is going to pay for your attorney fees to defend you, and up to $1 million if you're found liable.
Oh, we won't let him know about that, will we? Wow.
Yeah.
So when you have a situation like that, what's the best way to go about it? So like she's kind of in the start of this. So should they just wait and see if something's filed, or should they start to look for an attorney? Do you happen to know what the process would be, or is there somebody that we can reach out with an AIM that could help us?
Not really, because I mean, I can advise you on insurance. I cannot advise you on legal fees or legal matters, and that's something we're beat into our heads. We have to be careful on, we can't advise you on any legal matters. But from what I've seen in the past, I would say wait until you see that there is a suit filed, because a lot of times people get mad. I mean, obviously talk to them, try to make it go away if you can, but I wouldn't go hire an attorney until you see if they're going to file. A lot of times this stuff fizzles out and goes away, and you wouldn't need to worry about it, because the insurance isn't going to pay unless a suit is filed for your attorney. So you might as well wait until the claim's filed, and then your insurance is going to pay anyway.
Would it be
Yeah.
wise to contact our PTA attorney then to have some guidance?
I would say yes on the discrimination suit. Like I said, I'm not giving legal advice, but I would say yes. If you have a PTA attorney, I would ask them and get their recommendation on what they say to do.
Okay, well, because I think that might be, it's a possibility anyway, so. All right.
Oh, wait, I got, do I have messages?
Do we have any other questions? You can go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question.
Don't really have a question, but I'm a little nervous now to have PTA events.
Well, the whole point of this is actually for you not to be nervous, because we want you to know that you actually have great coverage that's going to help you with these things. Colorado PTA has a certain requirements set in place so that every one of their units has good coverage, which a lot of states don't do. And then they come in and they go, oh, well, I didn't know I needed that. Colorado has taken care of their units. They're making sure that each one of you have the 3 most important coverages that's going to cover almost everything you're going to need. The other stuff is more optional that doesn't apply to everybody. You may or may not need, but they made sure you've got the things that they know you're going to need covered.
Okay. I'm a new officer, will be president next year. Is a good idea probably to call our insurance agent just to go over our coverage to make sure we're aware of it and have the coverage we're happy with?
It's always a good idea because you never know. There may be something you mentioned that, that's unique to your unit that you may need to take care of. And a lot of times, sometimes people have things they don't need. I mean, a lot of times I get calls, people, I go, you don't really need to be spending all this, if you're a small unit, you can't afford it. This is where, you could save some money, especially this last year with a lot of units not doing anything and their budgets were really tight. We got a lot of calls about how can I save some money? And we were able to go in and say, look, this is something you could do optional and add it on later if you need it, but right now you don't. So don't be nervous, Amy. We got you.
All right, thank you.
And remember, it's kind of like when you go to the doctors, right? And you have a procedure done and they're like, all these things can happen. That's basically what she's explained. All these things could happen, but it's a slim chance, hopefully, that any of these things will happen. So don't let that scare you. But you're covered and covered
Exactly.
covered by good companies. So yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Well, Pamela, if nobody else has questions, thank you so much for sharing that. And then also, everybody, thank you so much for joining the Colorado PTA's 99th convention with this workshop.
Well, thank you very much for having us here. And we look forward to meeting in person, hopefully next year.
Yes, yes, yes.